it's actually allowing yourself time to think about what needs to happen, what's the direction we want to go in, how are we going to get there, and how are we going to make it happen? Because if you're too deep into the trenches of doing stuff, then you could be going in the completely wrong direction and not even realize it. So, it's really stepping back and making sure that you're always looking at the bigger picture of what's going on, what is it we want to achieve, and making sure everyone's focused on the most important pieces.
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Today, we have the fabulous Michelle Brogan. She is a marketing executive. She's currently the head of go-to-market at Allianz, formerly regional head of marketing at Symantec, and a mother, mentor, and coach. Michelle, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Rico, for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, and I appreciate you making your time available, because I know you're in our time zones are like almost opposite. So it's in evening for you, morning for me. So we'll jump right in. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're the head of go-to-market. How did you get to where you are? What was your journey like?
So I think for me, I was quite lucky in that in the early noughties, when digital marketing was starting to evolve and it was a relatively new concept, I fell into it by chance. I wanted a proper marketing job where, it was TV advertising, radio advertising, and I ended up in the digital space. And I was actually quite fortunate because, as we know now, that's the trend that evolved, and it's pretty much all digital marketing now. So I got in quite early on, and then progressed as the digital marketing industry progressed over time.
Yeah. So going a step back, because you said you wanted to be a marketer. What was the dream when you were growing up? When little Michelle growing up, what was the dream? What did you want to do, and how did you end up deciding to go on this path?
Yeah, I think there was like a TV show, and it was about these creative advertising guys who used to come up with advertising. It was kind of the core. I think it was called 30 something or something along those lines. But it looked like it was like a really exciting, interesting job. And that's what kind of the creative element really drew me in, early on, in wanting to put together, I guess, key messages and advertising campaigns that would resonate with customers and really sell the proposition that you're trying to get people to buy. It was really that kind of drew me in early on.
Yeah, that it's interesting. 30 something. We're probably dating ourselves, because I know that show really well. I don't know if other people will know. I think this generation's version of that maybe is Mad Men or something like that, right? Watching John Hamm run this like 60s, 70s, or 60s, 50s agency, ad agency.
Yeah.
So when it came to marketing, what was your mission? Like, what did you want to get into? You talked a lot about like creative and storytelling, but for you, what was the why behind marketing?
I think for me, one of the things I've always enjoyed in the marketing space is that it's always been evolving and changing, and there's been new technologies and new dimensions to marketing that have happened over the last 2 decades. And I think that's what really kept me engaged, because as social media channels come on, analytics come out, the depth of information you can now find out about your customers is so vast. When I studied marketing at college, it was like, an ABC profile, blue collar worker, what you knew about a customer was pretty much nothing. You were basically just breaking the world into 5 different buckets, whereas now you have really detailed insights into different customer personas and real knowledge about who the customers are, and you can become so targeted. You don't have to spend millions on advertising, running massive campaigns. You can actually run a campaign on a very small amount of money, because you can be very, very targeted if you know exactly what your customer profile looks like for the customer who's going to buy your product. And I think for me, just the way the digital ecosystem works and the way customers move around it, and sometimes parts of it is just common sense. If an online shopping journey doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you're not going to make money. And you need to look at the customer insights and what customers are telling you as to where the blockages are in that customer path that's preventing them from buying. Because I know myself from my own personal experience, sometimes you're online and you actually want to buy something, but the company has made it so difficult to fill out the form, or there's a question that you can't answer and you can't actually buy the product. So, it's become, I guess, so much more personalized and intuitive that you're always learning, and there's always new things coming. And I can't wait to see what direction it's going to go in next, because there's AI is changing everything again, and it's going to make things so much more sophisticated. So it's definitely an industry that's constantly changing, constantly evolving, and definitely becoming so much more sophisticated on different levels.
Yeah. So that's amazing, right? Like, so technology has changed, access to data has changed, user behavior's changed, and you've had big jobs and you evolved with this. The one thing I want to ask is, how has the storytelling piece evolved for you, right? So, you had big job at Symantec, you have a big job now, and the stories that we tell have to evolve along with the data, technology, and all that stuff. So for you, how has that changed and evolved over time in the way you tell stories and the way you connect users with products?
I think what I kind of learned over the years, and something that really clicks with me now more than ever, is really what are the benefits the products are selling. And earlier in my career, I used to hear the sales team say over and over again, what are the benefits? You're not selling the benefits. Because sometimes our product pages, there's there could be 40 things there, and from a customer, like, what are the benefits that are going to actually resonate? And for me now, that's something that really clicks within my current role, is really understanding what are the key benefits. And it's only 2 or 3 that are really going to resonate with that customer as to why they want to buy the product. Within a product, there's so many things. When you sell a car, you don't say it's going to have wheels, it's going to have a gear stick. There's things that you just take for granted that the product is going to have. But what's special about this car that's better than other cars that you're not going to get is going to be that 1 or 2 things that's going to get the customer over the line. So for me, with regards to storytelling, it's really about resonating and getting the key benefits across, but it's also that wider story, because like we sell health insurance within the line of business I work in, but there's like a whole health story that goes around health insurance. And, we know from a search engine optimization perspective, that before somebody buys a product, they're doing their research online, they're looking up non-branded keywords, and there's that whole earlier stage in the customer journey where you can catch somebody much earlier in the process. And if you have really good, strong, compelling content that is providing them with good, strong information that they need, they'll feel the value in it, and that's your opportunity to get your brand up out front ahead of the competition, and start to build that relationship with the customer. So when they get further down the funnel and they get to the point where actually I need health insurance, and they start typing in the brand keywords into Google and they see your brand appear, they already know your brand because, they found out their visa information for their relocation, or they found out information about maybe a health condition they had, which are all related topics. So you're providing a service, but you're getting that brand exposure. And I know you know already, but the whole digital marketing piece is a digital ecosystem, and customers are moving around. They might be looking at content on your website, but it's not within the product space, it's within an education space. They're on social media, they might have filled out a lead form, could be sending them an email, and it takes multiple interactions to get that customer across the line. And you don't know which one interaction is going to be, but the combination of being in all of those spaces, promoting your brand and showing up with the correct messaging or bringing value to the customer is going to get that sale across the line. And it's kind of like a team, it's a combined effort across all the channels that's going to really get you, strong ROIs on all of your campaigns. And that's the bit I love. I love the orchestration of pulling it all together. And then I love the reward of seeing it work and seeing it happen, seeing lots more traffic coming into the website, seeing revenue grow, getting good net promoter scores from customers because, they're happy with their service, they're happy with how the whole customer onboarding process has worked, etc. And how the whole thing comes together is really satisfying.
I love that you walked through the whole thing, because if you are a non-marketing savvy executive, you need to listen to what Michelle just talked about for the last couple minutes, because there's so many startups and so many executives out there who think, oh, marketing, people just want to buy. But the truth is, there's only a small percentage, maybe 5% of people who won't come to whatever it is with the intent to buy. And to your point, I don't remember what the stats are. I know somebody ran this, but it's like 5 to 12 touch points before somebody actually trusts you enough to maybe make a purchase. Yeah. And some folks, whether it's personal branding.
I think one of the things for me, because I was just going to say, one of the things for me is because I've been in the industry so long and I've evolved with it, it's like getting a new learning module each year or each couple of years. And I just like, if I was coming into the industry now, the way it's evolved and the complexity of it, and there's so much to it, for somebody starting out now, it probably is a bit overwhelming trying to understand how the whole thing stacks together or how it works. And like you were saying, like you might just be focusing on one thing, one element, and thinking that one element is enough, and missing out the fact that, it's like a jigsaw, all the pieces need to be there in order to put it together. But, coming in now, because it's so sophisticated and there's so much to it, it probably is much more difficult for people coming new into the space to really understand it, whereas I think because we've been around for much longer, and we've kind of seen the jigsaw be built, we probably can see how the pieces stack together.
Mm-hmm. And the also love that you talked about what are the 1 to 2, 3 max things that make it different. And what a lot of people maybe don't understand is that's branding, right? Like there's so much now, there's so much competition no matter what industry you're in. There's a lot of competition. And to your point, instead of the 40 reasons why you're better, like what are the 2 to 3 things that you solve for the user? Like, what are their biggest pain points, and that they're going to actually say you're different. You do it faster, stronger, better, whatever it is. And if it's your personal brand, your company is a brand, whatever it is, it's important to create that distinguishing feature and to distinguish yourself from all the noise and the competition. So I love that you said that. So people, whether you're thinking of building your personal brand or your business, like that is an important thing to lay out first is what makes you different. I liken it to like, what is your market dominating position? So I love that you said that. I want to transition a little bit though too, because not only has the industry evolved, but I'm sure your skills and your career and your abilities as a leader has had to evolve. So I'd love to talk about that. So watching the marketing industry change, the digital marketing industry change, how has your leadership, how has your career had to evolve and change along with it?
Yeah, I think, for me, when I was much earlier in my career and I had much more junior roles, I think for me that the volume of work I did was massive. You know what I mean? I worked really long hours. I had a real drive to learn and get things to work. Because a lot of the time, you might try 3 or 4 different angles on something and only one of them is going to work. So if you test it one by one, it's going to take a long time to get a success. So, I would like do all 4 at the same time to make sure that I got a result at the end of the process. And I think, for a long time, for me, success was delivering stuff and producing results and demonstrating that I could deliver results, and that worked for a good period of time, and I got a few promotions off the back of always delivering and showing successes. But then I got to a point in my career where it flipped, and I had to change. I read a book which was called what gets you here won't get you there. And I was reading the book and I realized I was Bob, and I was like, oh my god, I'm Bob. And up until that point, being Bob was the person that you needed to be, and I needed to change from being Bob. Bob was the person who did everything and was involved in everything, and I needed to transition myself away from being Bob, but being the leader and enabling the team to be able to do it, and if there's a crisis, the team being able to deal with the crisis, and me not having to come in out of my holiday in order to solve something because nobody knew what to do. And I think that for a lot of people, it is a difficult transition to go from being the person who's pulling it all together to being the person who's leading it and enabling the team and giving that direction and building the confidence in the team as well to be able to do it. So that for me was a big transition, and also really, the change in how you need to change as a leader and being able to align your stakeholders, ensuring that when you have a project or an initiative that you need to get delivered, that the other functional departments, the other leaders in the business are bought into that idea as well and supporting it, so that you don't have obstacles along the way, etc. And it's really that, I guess, that space of bringing people together to unite them around a problem that needs to be solved, and then getting the problem solved and the solution implemented, etc. So those were the 2 big transition points for me. And it's like riding a bike. Once you transition, you wonder, why was I not doing this before? It makes so much more sense. But I think at different stages in your career, you need to do different things to be successful. And then when you start to hit a brick wall of not being able to move forward, then you need to relook and see, what skills do I need to change? How do I need to relook at this in order to be successful in the next stage of my career?
Yeah, I love that. And that is the thing you outlined is probably one of the most difficult things, that a theme that I've had, whether it's people on the podcast or people that I'm coaching, is how to transition from individual contributor into manager, leader. And some of the things are even, how do you transition from manager to director, director to VP, like all those things, right? And Steve Johnson, who is a is a mentor of mine. Um, he's the VP of design at Netflix. The thing he told me was, and I use this on a lot of people, is you can't do your old job and your new job at the same time. And so when you get that framing where you're like, yeah, if you're an individual contributor and you still keep trying to do your individual contributor job, but you also have to develop the strategies and lead the team and develop people and all those things, you can't do those things at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? It's just near impossible. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing that I had to learn, and helped me transition from individual
Yeah. And
contributor to.
it's having that time. Sorry, I cut across you. Yeah, it's actually allowing yourself time to think about
Mhm.
what needs to happen, what's the direction we want to go in, how are we going to get there, and how are we going to make it happen? Because if you're too deep into the trenches of doing stuff, then you could be going in the completely wrong direction and not even realize it. So, it's really stepping back and making sure that you're always looking at the bigger picture of what's going on, what is it we want to achieve, and making sure everyone's focused on the most important pieces, because nobody wants to be working on stuff that has no value or is a complete waste of time. Everyone wants to know that they're putting their heart and soul into things that are actually going to deliver results and they're going to make a difference.
That's a great point. And I'd love to ask how you've done that. So you've worked in different cultures with different working styles. So it's a two-parter. So one, you mentioned, getting buy-in from stakeholders. So I'd love to hear like how you go about that and how maybe your strategies had to evolve over time in getting stakeholder buy-in. And then also building that passion and that connection for your team to feel like they're doing meaningful work.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, like when I worked in my previous company, it was a mercenary organization. And when you say the word mercenary, I think people think it's like military army, that you're like assassinating people. But it's really just a high performance type environment where you're very focused on getting the work done and delivering results. And it's very much an environment of, Bob, you need to do this, Mary, you need to do this, and everyone's running at 100 miles an hour to deliver it. Whereas in my current organization, it's a highly communal organization, which means it's very much focused on relationships and having a strong network in the organization, and very much aligned around what's the problem we want to solve, and everyone aligning that they want to solve that problem before you go and fix it. So when I joined the organization, I came running in at 100 miles an hour, and nobody tells you when you walk into a company things are done differently here. It's just, you start trying to work and you start to feel like you can't get stuff done, and you don't know why you can't get it done. And other people in the organization can just see that you're an outlier from the outside because you're not working in the same methodology that everyone else is. And I think for me, once I understood that I was in a different culture, I had to totally unpick myself and start to change and alter my behaviors. I had to focus on starting to build my network within the organization, and really put a lot of time into building those relationships so that when the time came that I needed to drive a project forward, I knew my stakeholders well. They knew I had credibility, that they knew I knew what I was doing, so that when a project would come up and I would say, I need resources from your area, I need resources, this is my problem, this is why I need to fix it, they would then automatically jump in and say, yeah, get it, let's move forward. Whereas when I initially came in, I was like bouncing off people, and I was like, it felt like nobody here wants me to do any work. But once you understand the culture and the environment, you adapt your style, suddenly it's as easy working in that culture as it was the culture I left behind. And I think that's something that I see sometimes, in organizations. People come in and they're very strong people, and they leave within a year and they're gone. And, it's because they can't adapt to that change in culture. And maybe the preference is to work in the other type of culture, but, it is about changing your style and working out how do you work successfully in that new environment.
That's fantastic. What would you say was the biggest challenge in making that transition? You talked a little bit about it, right? Because you went from a mercenary to
Yes.
something like more of a communal type environment. But what was the biggest challenge for you in trying to navigate that change?
I think for me, it was like my default style is mercenary. And I guess I probably worked in a lot of mercenary organizations because, just the speed of getting things done, etc. I think the biggest change for me was really having to sit down and look at myself, and accept the fact that it's me that needs to change. I'm not going to be able to change an entire company into a mercenary style. It's just not going to happen. And really just kind of sitting down and, it's when you have to start changing your behaviors, it's like, the first couple of times, you're trying out new things and you're trying to adapt your style. It feels awkward and you feel like, God, you feel like a fraud, etc. But then, it's like a muscle. Once you start building it up, then it becomes second nature, and the more you practice it. But really, when I started to build out my network, and I realized, I have to get to know all of these people in the organization that, are key to me being able to deliver stuff and build a relationship with them. I was like, what am I going to say? Where do you start? Because it was a new space. Like I am a friendly person and I get on with people at work, but the piece of having to build out your network and build those relationships, and from a very much of a starting point was like, well, what am I going to say? Like, if I put in a meeting, like, what am I going to talk about? And then I like have my little list writing down, like, what are the topics I'm going to discuss with this person so that I don't show up and have nothing to say. And what I found was, like, over time, once I started building relationships, I didn't have to make notes anymore, because once I got a feel for what they were working on or what challenges they had, I would then quite quickly be able to go, okay, well, we're doing this, and you start to naturally start to evolve, and suddenly you're going to a meeting and they're talking about their stuff and you're helping them with their challenges, and vice versa, that it becomes more natural. But it's definitely that starting point, and it's like anything. I remember being in a social media meeting years ago, and someone saying, I want to get into social media. How do I start? And the social media manager was like, you send a tweet. And the person was like, but I don't know what to say. what will they say? And they're like, you can say anything you want. And it's like, oh, it's like that, it's like really trying to start with the content or get the narrative going.
Yeah, it's crazy how fear and just we get in our own way, just like that, right? I work with a lot of people who, like it or not, the world is becoming a creator economy, right? So everybody has, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people are now understanding the value of a personal brand and, creating content to share. And the most common thing I run into is like, well, who am I? Or like, what do I talk about? And for me, it's like, well, what do you love? What do you love to talk about anyway? Like, what do you talk about with your friends? What do you talk about at work? What do you talk about? If somebody were just to sit down and listen to you talk, what would you tell them? Right? And we put all these, I call them false blockers, because no one's telling you not to say that except for yourself, right? Just like that person is just, how do you get started in social media? You post. Well, what I post about? Well, what do you love? Post about that. So I love that you said that. Um, so I want to kind of shift now also into advice mode, right? So a lot of this is people are listening to hear about your story, hear about your struggles, but also what advice you would have. So you now, going through all the things that you've been through, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think the advice I would definitely give my younger self, and it's something that has only clicked with me in the last few years, is it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to do it all yourself. And I think like quite early in my career, like I had this pressure on myself that I had to be the one to figure it out. I had to be the one that had all the answers. So, I would spend a lot of time figuring things out myself and then coming out, have the answer, I know how to do it, etc. And what I've realized in the last few years is like, do you know what? Like, it's much quicker. Other people have really good ideas too. People are actually really happy. If you say, oh, hi, Rico, could I get your advice on something? You're delighted that you're being asked for advice and your opinion's valued and you would be thought of in that way. And I've realized that, I probably would have had a much easier road to get to where I am if I had asked for help and advice more earlier in my career, rather than thinking that I had to be the one to figure it out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Definitely, ask for help, get advice, and it doesn't take away from anything you deliver. And I guess be kind. Be kind to people around you. You never know what's happening in someone else's life. And I know we don't go into the office as much as we used to, but we all come to work, but we all have a life outside of work, and you never know what's happened in someone else's life. And sometimes you go onto a video call or you go into a meeting and someone's a bit grumpy. You don't know, their cat might have died that morning and they haven't said, and they're having a really bad day. So I think it's definitely, especially in today's day, I can't say the words, but it's so much focus on mental health and well-being. I think the kinder we can be to people and bringing that understanding into work as well will definitely go a long way.
And it doesn't take extra effort to be kind.
Yes.
Right? You may not be in your nature, which for some people maybe, because some people are blunt, right? And it's not that they're mean or have bad intentions. It's just they say what's on their mind. But it doesn't take much time to take a second and say it back in your head and to be kind. And I totally agree. Like that's a small thing that we can all do for each other. Um,
Yeah.
Going back to asking for help, and for me, that was one of the biggest unlocks. And it actually I believe it actually helped me propel my career forward. Because getting into the next question I want to ask you is, the folks that I would ask for help a lot of the time were mentors or people who had been there and done that. And for a lot of people, then you may think that, oh, if I ask this VP or CEO or something for help, that they may think I'm not capable. And it's quite the opposite. When you ask for help, you're actually tapping into their years of knowledge, and it's a great shortcut and a great unlock for people who are willing to do it. And I was absolutely willing to do it. So the question I have for you is, what role did mentorship or coaching play for you? And if you want to, this could be your like awards moment. Are there any mentors you'd like to mention that really impacted your life?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have a sponsor within Allianz, Tony Bradshaw, and he is very senior within the organization, and because I built a relationship with him, and like you said, you have someone that you can ask questions to, and sometimes you might think, oh, are they going to think less of me because I don't know the answer? But the reality of it is that you actually start to build confidence in yourself, because the doubts or the questions that you have, or the unanswered questions, when you actually speak to someone who is like, in that much more senior position to you and has been so much more successful, and then you start talking to them and you start realizing, oh, there's traits you have and I have them too. Or you get little nuggets of advice to things that maybe you would never get exposure to that type of information and see something from that perspective. That for me, it really helped build my own confidence in myself. Currently, we have a mentorship program within Allianz as well. So I'm a mentor to someone within the company, but it is so lovely and rewarding when you're the one giving the advice back and the person is really responding to it, and is getting that, I guess, like you said, that fast track insight into stuff that they wouldn't normally get. So I think it works both ways, and I think it doesn't really matter what level in an organization you are, having a mentor or a sponsor there all the time. Like I told my mentoree, well, I have a mentor too. And she was like, what? She couldn't believe that I would have a mentor. And I'm like, of course. Of course, it never ends.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that need for opening your mind, getting more advice, and more direction, and sometimes it's just about getting clarity on different scenarios as to the direction you should be going in, etc.
Yeah, I have a mentor, I have a coach. I have many mentors actually, and it's that thing where sometimes you can't get out of your own head, and sometimes hearing it back or having someone ask you a simple yet provocative question can get you out of your own head, and can also unlock another way of looking at things. So 100%. And I've also learned from people from mentees, that you said it too, it goes both ways. Like, I learn a lot from mentees, maybe more so than that they learn from me, right? Because you talked about someone who wants to get into social media or something like that. I'm sure there's a lot of executives out there that don't know where to start, and there's a 30 something or 20 something that'll say, well, just start today. Like,
Yeah.
right, and post whatever you want, right? And see, so that is a mentorship that can go both ways, right? So it's not always a one-way street when it comes to these things.
Yes, definitely. And things are changing. That one of my fears is that the world will change from under me, because technology changes at such a fast pace that you do need to stay close to the millennials and the young Gen X's, etc., because it's natural for them. You know what I mean? They're born into technology. They're on it all the time. We don't have all day to spend on it. So there's definitely things that we will learn from them, definitely around patterns of technology adoption and customer behavior and stuff, as that all starts to change and evolve, and also emerging technologies that are probably there that haven't come up onto the main radar yet as well.
Yeah, I there's something you mentioned earlier, and we won't get into it now because we can talk for another 40 minutes. But I'm gonna do a series on like AI's impact on different industries. So I'd love to have you back if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah, that would be
It talks like
fantastic.
talking about emerging technologies. Okay, cool. And so Michelle, if people want to get in touch with you or want to ask you a question, what's the best way for people to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm quite easy to find. I dip in and out of social media, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, just connect with me on LinkedIn. I pretty much connect with everyone on LinkedIn. I amalgamate a mass following on LinkedIn, so you can just connect with me and drop me a message, and I'm happy to respond.
Okay, perfect. And I'll link your profile in the show notes. So if someone, you can search for Michelle, or you can just click on the link in the show notes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. This has been another great episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. We will see you next time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today, and let's make your future a reality.